The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.
It's a terrifying question that we probably expected to hear only in science fiction. But since experts have now put it on the table, we'll debate it tonight in real life. Does artificial intelligence pose an existential threat to humans? Then, between advances in brain imaging and AI, can machines now read our minds? We'll find out. Also, J.N. Jagannathan learns why people in Minden, Ontario, are mobilizing to stop the closure of the emergency room in their community. It's Thursday, May 11th, and that's coming up on The Agenda. Remember way back in late 2022 when everyone was trying out the artificial intelligence apps, having fun and being wowed by what they could do? How quickly things have changed. Just months later, major voices in the tech universe, including some of the core developers of those technologies, now say we need to pump the brakes because AI could pose, quote, profound risks to society and humanity. With us now for more, let's welcome in Seattle, Washington, Pedro Domingos, Professor Emeritus of Computer Science and Engineering at the University of Washington. He's also the author of The Master Algorithm. In the downtown of our nation's capital, Jeremy Harris, co-founder of Gladstone AI and the author of Quantum Physics Made Me Do It. And here in our studio, Gillian Hadfield, Professor of Law and Schwartz Reisman Chair in Technology and Society at the University of Toronto and the CIFAR AI Chair at the Vector Institute. Gillian, great to have you back here in that chair. And to our friends Pedro and Jeremy in Points Beyond, thanks for joining us on TVO tonight. I just want to set up our conversation by reading something from an open letter signed by thousands. This was back in March. Elon Musk signed it. Steve Wozniak, the co-founder of Apple, signed it, many others, calling for a 6-month pause on AI development. And here's an excerpt from that letter. Sheldon, bring this up if you will, and I'll read along with. AI systems with human competitive intelligence can pose profound risks to society and humanity. Recent months have seen AI labs locked in an out-of-control race to develop and deploy ever more powerful digital minds that no one, not even their creators, can understand, predict, or reliably control. And then last week, Geoffrey Hinton, known of course as the godfather of AI, spent a lot of time at the University of Toronto. He left Google to warn of the dangers of AI. He said, maybe what is going on in these systems is actually a lot better than what is going on in the brain. Look at how it was 5 years ago and how it is now. Take the difference, propagate it forwards. That's scary. That's Geoffrey Hinton. Okay, Gillian, how would you characterize this moment in history for AI?
Well, I think we are at a real inflection point in thinking about AI. As you pointed out, we've seen tremendous advances. What we were seeing in the fall was exciting and new. And I think what we really are seeing is, gosh, maybe there is a lot more happening here than we've understood. And I think that's what the pause letter is about, is, hey, folks, maybe we're going a little too fast.
Pedro, what's your view on that?
I think we're not going too fast at all. In fact, I think we're not going fast enough. If AI is going to do things like cure cancer, do you want to have a cure for cancer years from now or yesterday? What is the point of a 6-month moratorium, right? I don't think there's an out-of-control race. I think that letter is a piece of hysteria. And I think the bigger worry for me is not that AI will exterminate us, or for most AI researchers, is that a lot of harm will be done by putting in restrictions, regulations, moratorium, and whatnot, that there's really no reason for.
Jeremy, your take on that question.
Yeah, well, I think it's clear that we've taken some significant steps towards human-level AI in the last 3 years in particular. I think that's actually so much the case that, as we've just seen, we have many of the world's top AI researchers, including 2 out of 3, the earliest pioneers of modern AI, wondering aloud about whether we might have kind of fully cracked the code on intelligence. I might not go that far personally, but this is actually being talked about through that lens and looking at like whether the techniques we have today, just by throwing more data, more processing power at these same techniques, we might be able to achieve something like, human level or superhuman AI. If that's anything like the case, if that is even within the ballpark of possibility, then we need to contemplate some fairly radical shifts in the risk landscape that we're exposed to via this technology, and then society more broadly.
Fairly radical shifts means what?
Well, there are a lot of different dimensions. One key one is malicious use, right? As these systems become more powerful, the destructive footprint of malicious actors that use them just grow and grow and grow. And we've already seen examples, for example, China, like using powerful AI systems to interfere in in Taiwan's electoral process. We've seen cybersecurity sort of malware be generated by people who don't know how to code. That's a fundamental shift in that landscape. And then, of course, there's the risk of catastrophic AI accidents, which folks like Geoff Hinton are flagging there. So I think those two broad categories are really big. There's workforce displacement and other things too. But what really kind of gets me to perk up, I think, is malicious use and the accident piece.
Okay, Gillian, let me get you to circle back to the initial comment by Pedro that if you're looking for a cure to cancer, you don't go slow, you go faster. What do you say?
Well, I absolutely agree that there's lots of tremendous benefits, and I think we absolutely want those benefits, and we want to continue doing our research and building the system. So I think that's a really important point. But I think one of the things that's really critical here is if you think about our medical research, it takes place within a regulated structure. We have ways of testing it, we have clinical trials, we have ways of deciding what pharmaceuticals and medical devices and treatments to put out there. And with AI, we see such a leap in capability that a lot of the techniques, the tools, the ways in which it transforms research and work has basically outstripped our existing regulatory environments, and we haven't built the ones that I think make this the kind of thing that's safe enough in the exact same way we regulate all the rest of our economy to make sure it's good and safe and working the way we want it to.
Pedro, what about the notion that when you're searching for the cure for cancer, there's lots of patient protection regulations in there that are not there when it comes to AI, and therefore we ought to be careful? What say you?
I think this analogy that people keep making between AI and biology is mistaken, and medicine and things like drug approval, which itself, by the way, has lots of problems. The drug approval, mechanisms that we have in place cost lives, and even the FDA, for example, in the United States, understands that needs to change. So that is hardly a good model. But more important than that, regulating AI is not like regulating drugs. It's more like regulating quantum mechanics or mechanical engineering. You can regulate the nuclear industry or regulate cars or planes. You can regulate and should and do regulate specific applications of AI. But regulating AI qua AI just doesn't make sense. And the proposals that I've seen don't make any more sense than that does. There are some places like Europe that have this thing called the AI Act that attempts to define AI. It's so broad that anything could be AI or nothing, and they're having to revise it in the light of ChatGPT. I think we really need to, ask questions before we shoot and understand the technology and figure out what needs and doesn't need to be regulated, and do what, in fact, OpenAI has been doing, which I think is great, which is don't restrict it. The best way to make AI safe is to put it in the hands of everybody so everybody can find the bugs. We know this. In computer science, the more complex the system, the more people need to look at it. What we don't need is say like, oh, let's put this in the hand of a committee of 12 regulators or experts, and they're going to figure out what's wrong with it. That's exactly the wrong approach.
All right. Well, we're going to come back and we'll do more on regulation later in our discussion. But let's try this. Jeremy, do you think AI poses an existential risk to humanity?
I think that the argument that it does is actually backed by a lot more evidence than most people realize. Like, it's not a coincidence that Geoff Hinton, known as the godfather of modern AI for a reason, for having not invented deep learning, but certainly contributed significantly to it, is on board here. It's not a coincidence that when you talk to folks at the world's leading AI labs, the ones that are building the world's most powerful AI systems, the ChatGPTs, the GPT-4s, the closer you get in concentric circles to those people, the higher you hear their estimate for the probability that this will actually amount to an existential risk. The main vector that's usually proposed, or one of them at least, is this idea of power seeking in sufficiently advanced systems. That's the one that Geoff Hinton put on the table. And it's one that we've seen written up and studied empirically in some of the world's top AI conferences. It's quite well backed now by a variety of different sources of evidence. So I think it's something we should be taking seriously. Nothing is guaranteed. That's part of the unique challenge of this moment. right? We've never made AI systems, we've never made intelligent systems smarter than us. We've never lived in a world where those systems exist. And so we kind of have to deal with that uncertainty in the best way we can. Part of that is by consulting with folks who actually understand these systems and specifically are experts in technical safety.
Gillian, I'm curious as to your reaction when you heard Geoffrey Hinton make the comments that he made, but because certainly I think much of the rest of the world was utterly shocked. What did you think?
Well, I think Jeff was truly surprised, has been truly surprised by the advances that we've seen in the last 6 months. Obviously, he's been tremendously close to this, but I think a number of people didn't really think that just scaling up language models, generative models, was going to produce the kind of capabilities that we've seen. So I think I think what you see with Jeff, and I've had lots of discussions with him. He's on my advisory board at the Schwartz Reisman Institute, and so this I think was a real update for him as to the nature of the risk. And if you listen to what he has to say, it's not. I know that there's an existential risk. I know that he's saying there is so much uncertainty about the way these behave that we should be studying that problem and not getting out ahead of it. And so I think that's an important update for everyone. It's an important statement.
Pedro, when somebody the likes of Geoffrey Hinton rings that existential bell, does it not give you pause?
Well, I've known Jeff for a long time. He's a great researcher. He's also an old anarchist and a little otherworldly. And I think we need to, be careful about overinterpreting what he's saying. People need to know that most AI researchers do not think that AI poses an existential threat to humanity. That's nonsense. Now, it's interesting to understand why some people who used to be at the fringes believe that, and there are indeed some. In fact, ironically, it's the more optimistic people about how fast we're going to get to AI that are the most worried. And Jeff is an ultra optimist, so that is entirely consistent.
Well, he was an ultra optimist. I'm not sure he is anymore, is he?
No. He's an optimist about how fast we're going to get to AI, how feasible it is, how easy the problem is, right? There are many AI researchers who think we will never even get to human level AI, which is quite possible. I think we will get there, but I don't think it's going to be tomorrow. I think people need to understand that, number one, we are still very far from human level intelligence. AI from the beginning has done this thing of it always seems more intelligent than it is because we project our human qualities into it. We also project, and very relevant to this problem, our human wants and emotions and desires and intentions, of which it has none. So trying to, what Jeff has said, like, what if an AI wants to take over? And then Yann LeCun said, but AIs don't want anything. Exactly right. It's an algorithm. And that's one thing, right? People need to understand this, that an AI is an algorithm. It's not something that we don't control. Now, when you do machine learning, the AI does something you can't predict, but that is being done to optimize this function that we determine. And that's where the debate needs to be, is how to optimize it. And then there's another very important thing, which the public doesn't know, but I think should know by now, which is that AIs for solving problems that are intractable, meaning it takes exponential time to solve them. That's the technical definition of AI. But it's easy to check the solution. So an AI could be exponentially smarter than we are, and we would still be fine controlling it.
Okay, let me get to Gillian here. She's giving me a look that suggests that she wants to comment on what you just had to say. So go ahead, Gillian.
Yeah. So I want to put the existential threat question in a broader lens as well. It's true that I think there's malicious use to be concerned about, but I don't really think that the risks are around rogue AI, a rogue AI that develops its own goals and Terminator style wants to kill us all. That's not the threat that I think is out there. The thing I worry about, as somebody who thinks a lot about how our complex human systems work, our financial systems, our economic systems, our social systems, my concern is really not about human level AI per se, but it's about the capacity for autonomous agents that are out there already trading on our financial markets, participating in sort of our labor markets, reviewing and hiring. And as we build these systems that have higher and higher capabilities, OpenAI, for example, there are plugins that you can get the model to decide not just where should you go on your honeymoon, but go off and make the reservations and book the airplanes and so on. And it's when you start introducing that kind of autonomous agent into the world, and you say, okay, so how do we make sure that autonomous agent doesn't break our financial system, doesn't break our employment system?
I think that's getting closer to where Jeremy gets concerned, that we are entering Terminator territory. Am I reading too much into your views here, Jeremy?
Yeah, no, not at all. Actually, as wild as it might sound, though, I guess now it's nice to be in good company with the likes of Geoff Hinton. I think it is the case. So a couple things. First off, on this question of these are just algorithms, what do they really want, and so on, this is really where the entire domain of power seeking. I mean, this is an entire subfield in AI safety. It's well researched. These objections are very robustly addressed, at least in my opinion. My team has actually made contributions to this body of work directly. This is a real thing, and the closer you get to these centers of expertise at the world's top AI labs, the Google DeepMinds, the OpenAIs, again, the very labs building ChatGPT and the next generation of systems, the more you see the emphasis on this risk class. So again, I think Geoff Hinton and Yoshua Bengio, to a maybe lesser degree, but still importantly, are both on this train for a reason. I think their view reflects the view of a growing body of AI researchers. And it's not even particularly clear to me that the majority of AI researchers do think that catastrophic risk is not a thing. There's a poll done a few months ago that saw that 48% of general AI researchers, not specialists in safety, who would be the best informed on this, but general AI researchers estimate a 10% or greater probability of catastrophic risk from AI. If you were looking to get on a plane and like 50% of the engineers that made that plane said, I think there's a 10% chance that this thing's going to crash with you in it, like, this is not a game of Russian roulette that I think most people would particularly want to play if they were tracking it perhaps as some folks at the cutting edge are.
No, I hear you on that for sure. Now, let me read a quote out to everybody here. This is the head of AI at Meta, I guess Facebook, what used to be Facebook. Here's what he recently tweeted. He said, "We can design AI systems to be both super intelligent and submissive to humans. I always wonder why people just assume that intelligent entities will necessarily want to dominate. That's just plain false, even within the human species." Okay, Jeremy, pick up on that if you would. Why do you assume that AI, if it does become more intelligent than us, would automatically want to conquer us?
Yeah, so I think the word assume there is bearing an awful lot of that load. This is actually not an assumption. It's an inference based on a body of evidence in this domain of power seeking. Again, like a bunch of work that's been done at frontier labs with contributions from the world's top AI researchers suggests that the default path for these systems is to look for states, look for situations to occupy, to position themselves in, that have high optionality. Basically, that's the trend that we start to see. These systems seek high optionality because that's useful for whatever objective they might be trained or programmed to pursue. And so that's the fundamental root of this power-seeking behavior. And as your AI systems get more intelligent, the concern is they start to recognize these incentives. They start to act more and more on these incentives. And anyway, so I guess I would just zoom out there and say, like, this sort of fundamentally, I think, fails to engage with a pretty important piece of fundamental AI safety literature that it really should.
While you were speaking, Pedro had a very, very big smile on his face, and I want to know what's behind that smile, Pedro.
Sorry, I just have a hard time taking all of this seriously. As has Yann LeCun, who, by the way, is one of the other three co-founders of Deep Learning. So again, he's at the same level as Geoff and Yoshua. And I think it's interesting to think or to notice that the people who tend to be more hysterical about AI are actually the people who are farthest from actually using it in practice. AI engineers, people at companies like Yann, who's at Meta and whatnot, they know what it is like to work with AI. The people who tend to be paranoid about AI are the ones who are always kind of like fascinated with the potential. And there's room for a few crazy people in academia. The world needs those. But once you start making important societal decisions based on them, you need to think twice. I mean, I'm with Jillian here that my biggest problem with a lot of this is that these Terminator concerns are taking attention away from the real issues, the real risks that we need to be talking about, which are very much the risks of malicious use. We need something like what William Gibson called the Turing police, right? We need the cops, the AI cops, to deal with AI criminals. We need that. We have the problem of AI in the hands of totalitarian regimes. Democracies need to start making better use of AI. And there's the biggest problem of all, which is a problem of today, not of tomorrow, which is of incompetent, stupid AI making consequential decisions that hurt people. The mantra of the people trying to control AI is that we need to restrict it and slow it down. It's the opposite. Stupid AI is unsafe AI. The way you make AI safer is by making it smarter, which is precisely the opposite of what the things like the moratorium letter are calling for.
Gillian, where are you on all that?
Well, I signed the letter, and I signed it so that we'd be having this conversation, not because I think that that's going to happen, that I think it's essential that we stop. I don't think we're on a precipice. But I do think it's critical that we're having the conversation about, currently these systems are being built almost exclusively inside private technology labs, and lots of really motivated people. I work with folks at OpenAI. I know there's a lot of concern about safety, but they're making those decisions internally about how to train it so it speaks better to people, right? That was part of the advance that we got out of ChatGPT. When should we release it? What rate should we release it? To whom should we release it? What limits and guardrails should we put in place? And my concern is I think those are things that we should be deciding publicly, democratically, with expertise outside of the engineering expertise that is dominating here. So I think that my concern is about the speed. Is that, so I'm a social scientist, I'm an economist, a legal scholar. I think about the legal and regulatory infrastructure that we build, and I don't see us paying enough attention to that set of questions. The EU AI Act and so on, that's already anachronistic relative to the types of systems that we're looking at today.
Just out of curiosity, how did you come to sign the letter? Who approached you? Who pitched you? How did all that work?
I think I just saw it. I saw it tweeted. Colleagues have signed it. I work a lot with Stuart Russell, although I don't think he's the one who asked me to sign it. I'm pretty sure he didn't. But I think it just came across and I really did sign it from this point of view, saying, as Jeremy's emphasizing, this is actually what a lot of people inside these organizations are seeing. And I think we need to have attention to it. So the fact that you've got this show, Steve, addressing this question is precisely why I signed it.
Gotcha. Here's Geoffrey Hinton again, for what it's worth. He says, it's absolutely possible I'm wrong. We're in a period of huge uncertainty where we really don't know what's going to happen. Okay, let's look forward based on that. When the printing press was invented, we didn't know what impact it would have. We had to wait a little while to find out. Same for the internet. We didn't know what the immediate impact of that was going to be. You could say the same for the steam engine, the cotton gin, the clock. These were all amazing inventions. People didn't know what to make of them at the moment. Why is this, Jeremy, you take this on first. Why is this technological moment, if you believe it is, any different from any of those previous discoveries?
I think it's a really good question and a really important thing for us to grapple with, to understand what analogies we can actually draw from past technologies and apply to our thinking around policy and stuff. Look, the reality is that we're currently on a trajectory to build something potentially smarter than ourselves. It may or may not happen. But if it does, we're going to find ourselves in a place where we just can't predict any important information about how the future is going to unfold. Powerful AI introduces uncertainty along a whole bunch of different dimensions and to a degree we've just never experienced in our existence. Throughout human history, human intellectual capacity has been the one constant, right? We're all born with biological thinking hardware, and that's really all we've had to work from. So we just don't have a civilizational point of reference here, which is why I think it's so important to track this area really closely and start to think deeply about where it might go.
Pedro, how about you on that same question?
I think it is true that AI introduces uncertainty because it is a very powerful technology. It could be used for lots of different things, and we can't possibly predict what all of them are. And that's good, right? The best technologies, like many of the examples you gave, most of the best applications are something that no one could have anticipated. But what happens is we all work on the good applications and on containing the bad ones. Now, this notion, however, that is prevalent among a certain AI fringe, the transhumanists or singularitarians or so on, that AI is going to make the future completely unpredictable. This is mistaken. AI is still subject to the laws of physics and the laws of computation and to the sociology of socio-technical systems. We're going to actually have a lot of control over AI, even if there are aspects of how it works that we don't understand. A good analogy here is a car, right? You don't know how the engine of your car works. You don't feel an urgent need to understand it because it might blow up. That's for the mechanics. What you need to know, and what we as a society, in the case of AI, need to know is, like, you need to know where the steering wheel and the pedals are so you drive the car. And AI does have a steering wheel. It's what's called the objective function, and we need to drive that. And I very much agree that we need more than just the technologists thinking about this. But what worries me is that people are listening like, oh, AI is not just going to blow everything wide open. Not so, right? This is going to be a very interesting process. There are definitely going to be risks, but it's not like there's this failure of imagination that, oh, once there's a bigger intelligence than us on the planet, then like you can't predict anything anymore. No, as Jan was saying, we can have a very big intelligence and we can still be in control of it. It won't happen by default. So it's not like there's nothing to work on here, but we shouldn't throw up our hands and say like, oh, it's the end of civilization, right? I mean, like, AIs can't exist without massive support from humans every step of the way, right? There's all these reasons why this isn't going to happen. In fact, the limiting factor in the progress of AI is actually not the technical side. It's the human ability to use it and come to terms with it and adapt with it. That's what's going to set the rate limit, as it should be. So, AI is like, what the AI does is like, it lowers the cost of intelligence, and so now we can use it more. But in particular, the laws of economics still apply. The demand for intelligence goes up. The value of the complements goes up, right? So there's all these things that happen. And by the way, there's people at the University of Toronto that have studied this, very well, right? Bringing an economist's point of view to AI. And it's not like once we have very, high intelligence in machines, suddenly nothing can be predicted anymore.
Okay, let me get Jillian on this then. Do you think this technological moment is different from those other ones I listed?
I do. I think what's critical here is the speed with which it transforms entire markets. So I've seen, for example, in the legal domain, the ways in which the large language model you can build on top of that language model, on top of GPT-4, a capability that can do what lawyers do, takes them a week to do, the machine can do it in a couple of minutes. So that's going to be very, very disruptive. So the speed of transformation is very high. The potential scale, because it's a general purpose technology, it can show up everywhere. And so that means it can be deployed everywhere. So exactly right that the economics of buying, less expensive intelligence is going to find its way into just about everything that we do. So it's going to happen at that kind of scale. So like the comparison to like the automobile. Today,
you're concerned it's going to be Stephen King's Christine, that kind of car. Is that the problem?
I am not concerned about that.
Okay.
I'm actually not concerned about that.
Just checking.
But what I am concerned about is that we live in a world of lots of regulation around how we build and drive automobiles. It took 50 years before we built all that regulatory structure. There was basically none when cars start, as a consumer product. But, a car crash sadly does kill people, but a few people at a time, and it's just the car, and it's not every part of your economy. So I think it's the point that it goes so fast and it's so pervasive that I don't think we can approach it as we have with our previous technologies and say, let's put it out there, let's find out how it works, we will figure out how to regulate it. I think we have to be a little bit more proactive than that.
In which case, Jeremy, tell us what the next, if we're talking about a pause, what does that actually look like in terms of the safe development of AI?
Yeah, and actually, just to quickly piggyback on what Jillian was flagging there, I just think one major aspect of the economic story here is also the correlation of risk that this induces, right? When you have many different downstream products all running on the same fundamental AI system, this fundamentally shifts the risk landscape, where if something goes wrong with that base model, that area of that risk gets inherited. So there's a lot of kind of new dimensions here. In terms of the pause, so I'm not a signatory of the letter. I don't think it's necessarily a great idea, partly because you pause AI development in the West for 6 months. That does nothing for China. That's one issue. Another thing is, if you are concerned about the race dynamics here, you might be interested to note that the cost of processing power drops over time. So as we get better and better at building more powerful processors, reaching the frontiers gets cheaper. And so you may find that you start off with a small number of actors, as we do now at the cutting edge of AI. You pause for 6 months, and when you hit go again, you're dealing with a whole plethora of actors here and a much less manageable situation. So I think the pause letter was great in starting this conversation, to Jillian's point earlier. I think it did its job, but now kind of the work of policy really begins in earnest. And I think there are a couple of different things that we could do, which anyway, I'm sure we'll get into, but it's a conversation starter.
I'll throw that over to Pedro right now. I appreciate the fact that you're not a fan of the pause, but if we do want to make sure that AI develops in a way that is safe and gives a lot of people the sense of security about the whole thing, what do you see as being necessary to that goal?
Well, first of all, here's something that people should be aware of. The pause is not just a bad idea. It's completely unenforceable. There's no way to implement a pause in AI. There's this notion that AI is locked inside these few big tech companies, but that's not the reality. Most of AI research is done in academia. Any kid with a computer can do AI. And moreover, that's starting to be the case, which is actually a great thing. So somebody tomorrow declares we're going to pause AI, and the AI just doesn't pause. You can't stop it either internally, within democracies, or of course, let alone with countries like China and whatnot. So the whole notion of a pause is just, I haven't seen anybody actually make a concrete proposal as to how this will be implemented.
Okay,
AI is
if not a pause, how do we go forward safely?
Right. So I think how we go forward safely is a couple of things. One of them is exactly what OpenAI has been doing, and Sam Altman, never tires of saying that, which is we roll it out every step of the way, letting people play with it, getting their feedback. This is how you catch bugs and errors. The more powerful the technology, actually, the more people need to be looking at it, not the fewer. And this whole notion that we need to proactively regulate AI, every piece of history tells us that that doesn't work. And it will work even less with AI because AI is less predictable. Is that you have to regulate and put in the guardrails and whatnot as you see what happens, not before, because before, we don't even know what a real AI is going to look like. We don't have one yet. So trying to regulate in advance is almost guaranteed to be a mistake. Now, what we need to do, right, is we need to have this I think is something that is very important, is the governments, the regulatory organizations need to have their own AIs, whose job is to deal with the AIs of the Googles and Amazons and so on. There's no fixed, old-fashioned set of regulations that you or the kind that you could use for cars that will work for AI. We need something as adaptive on the government side as it is on the corporation side, right? And then these AIs talk with each other. And when I talk about this to policymakers and politicians and whatnot, they sigh because this is clearly not on their radar yet. But it's already starting to happen in areas like, for example, the financial markets, because there's no choice, right? There's all of this bad activity, and you got to have the AI to deal with it. And the lawmakers need to start thinking about what is our AI going to do to deal correctly with the AIs of the Googles and so on. I think that's a much better approach.
Great discussion, everybody. Thanks so much for having it here on TVO tonight. Pedro Domingos in Seattle, Washington, he of the University of Washington. Jeremy Harris, co-founder, Gladstone AI from the nation's capital. Jillian Hatfield, professor of law, Schwartz Reisman Chair in Technology and Society, U of T, also the AI chair at CFAR, here in our studio in the Big Smoke. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Functional magnetic resonance imaging, or fMRIs, allow researchers to peer into the brains of living people while they're conscious. A window into the black box in our skulls, if you will. That's led to fascinating insights, not just about what parts of the brain are doing, but apparently even something about what the subject is thinking. And now, as in other fields, artificial intelligence may supercharge that work. So, can the AIs read our minds? Let's ask. In Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Marcel Just. He is the D.O. Hebb Professor of Psychology at Carnegie Mellon University, and we are delighted to welcome you to our program tonight, Professor Just. Let me just start by saying this month, researchers at the University of Texas used an earlier version of ChatGPT to translate the private thoughts of human subjects by analyzing brain scans. Now, you've been at this for more than a decade. What sort of initial reaction did you get when you told people about your interest in decoding thoughts just by looking at brain activity?
Well, some of our initial grant proposals came back treating us like crackpots. Like, how could you? This can't happen.
Have you ever gone back to them and said, "I told you so"?
I would have to graciously say that agency is funding my work now in studying how this kind of work can facilitate the learning of scientific concepts.
Well, take us through it. How do you actually do what you do?
Well, as you say, you put someone in a scanner, and through the magic of fMRI, so this is magnetic resonance, the magnetic fields in your brain are changing, and you can measure it every second or so. And the patterns are systematic. When you're thinking about a hammer, by golly, there's a pattern there that occurs every time you think of hammer. It occurs every time anyone else thinks of hammer. When somebody, whether they're in South America or Africa or Asia or whatever, if they think of hammer, that pattern occurs. And so I'm now speaking about the universality of this way the brain represents thought. The other very interesting thing about it is the systematicity of it. It's not just an arbitrary pattern for hammer that occurs in everybody's brain. It's systematic. Part of the pattern consists, of course, of what the hammer looks like. Maybe that's not surprising. Another part of the pattern consists of how you hold it, with your dominant hand. So when I think, or anybody thinks about a hammer, they think about their dominant hand grasping the handle of the hammer and perhaps wielding it. So these patterns are universal, they're systematic, they're decomposable. As I said, we started with concrete objects, seemed like the lowest hanging fruit, but we're now, and the field is now looking at more and more complex forms of thought.
Well, let's pick up on that. Yes, a hammer is an object, but what about something sort of more next generation, like emotions? Can you pick that up as well?
Yes. Again, what we did is we asked our participants to go in the scanner and we say, make yourself feel angry. Imagine a very anger-inducing situation. And, something happens in their brain. Well, what happens in their brain is the same thing that what happens in your brain or the brain of somebody in South America or Africa or Asia. When two people are in an intense verbal argument, ironically, the brain activity in both their heads is similar. And let me tell you some of the components that you can tell. I can, this isn't necessarily what they're angry about, but there's a very high intensity. So we know we can decode that they're intense about their emotion. We can also decode that it's negative. It's different from happiness. You can be intensely happy or intensely angry, and they're different by virtue of their valence, positive or negative. And so another thing that happens when you're angry is another thing that happens with your anger is that your brain signals that there's another person involved. When you're sad, you can be sad all by yourself, but with anger, there's another person involved, and that social part of your brain activates and signals the presence of another person you're interacting with.
Let's fast forward to this month, because researchers using AI were apparently able to read the minds of people listening to a podcast or even watching a silent film. We're going to read a little example here. This is the original transcript of audio that the subjects were listening to. The original transcript says, "I got up from the air mattress and pressed my face against the glass of the bedroom window, expecting to see eyes staring back at me, but instead only finding darkness." And here's the one from decoded from Brain Activity. "I just continued to walk up to the window and open the glass. I stood on my toes and peered out. I didn't see anything, and looked up again and I saw nothing." Now, they were also able to translate text from imagined thoughts, not just things that they were hearing. How could they do this?
Well, you see, it's kind of impressive, but imperfect. And what they did was they used this version of GPT to learn how to match brain activity to words. That was, I think, a clever use of this. And so they're using these new AI programs as a scientific tool, essentially. It's not GPT that's doing the brain interpretation. It's a fantastic ability to map the brain patterns to words, and then to help put the words together into sort of coherent text. I think, there's a lot of discussion, including on your program, of the impact of programs like ChatGPT. And what I haven't heard a lot about was how it will impact science. Science is a lot about learning about patterns, and I think these programs may prove to be extremely helpful in detecting regularities, developing mappings, and interpreting all sorts of phenomena in addition to the brain activity associated with thought.
Well, take us down that road. What do you see as the sort of real-life applications for what you're working on down the road?
There are two main applications for this kind of research. And, you're right to ask this, because why should society support research unless there's some payoff expected? And one is in the understanding, I think, of brain dysfunction and psychiatric illnesses, so that if you can see a systematic alteration of thought and identify it and say, oh, this is such and such brain pathology, and we recognize it, and maybe we can develop a treatment for it. So it wouldn't be just behavioral symptoms that would characterize a neurological or psychiatric dysfunction, but the brain activity patterns. So that's one possible large aid in diagnosis and characterization of neurological and psychiatric disorders. And the other possible application is in education and instruction. As I said, our knowledge is systematic. Our brain has a particular kind of indexing system, a way to organize its knowledge, and it organizes the same way for everyone. And if you know the brain's organization, if you know its filing system, how it decomposes things, how it files things, then you can design your instruction to match that. If we know the brain's filing system, and as I said, we all have the same filing cabinet mentally, we can design instruction so that the information fits very naturally into that filing cabinet. So let me say something that I'm not sure is an application, but I think at the end of the day, we all want to understand ourselves. We want to know what we're about. What am I good at? What do I like? What do I represent? What are my goals? And I think that that representation of oneself will become available in a much more explicit way than it ever has been in the past. I think this is a little bit of a moonshot kind of question, but still, I think it's interesting and I think it'll happen.
You've given us a lot to think about. Marcel Just, thank you for joining us from Carnegie Mellon University. Appreciate your time tonight here on TVO.
My pleasure.
As of June 1st, the emergency room in the Haliburton town of Minden will close. The move came as a big surprise to both year-round and seasonal residents. And despite the short notice, they are not giving up without a fight. With us now for that perspective in Perth, Ontario, Dr. Alan Drummond, physician and emergency medicine advocate with the Canadian Association of Emergency Physicians. And here in our studio, Patrick Porzuchek, spokesperson for the advocacy group Save Minden Ontario Emergency Room. Welcome to both of you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Now, Haliburton Highlands Health Services announced the change on April 20th, effective June 1st, that the ER would close. What's the response been so far from your organization and or from that organization with your group's concerns?
So a lot of things, like we've presented them, we've asked them to come out to our group, speak to me, speak to 5 members of the public, let us hear what the plan is. That's the one thing that's on everybody's mind in Minden is, they give this announcement on April 20th, the hospital's closing June 1st. No pre-warning, no real talk about it, and there's no plan. So now we lose accessibility for all these people in Minden that can't drive, they don't have access to make their way 25 minutes east of the city to get health care. It's really, really impacted all of us there. And they're basically taking this all away. So when we asked the questions, what they said was, we're working on a plan. There's no plan in place. Council didn't know about it. All the county's council didn't know. So from Minden Hills, from Dysart, from Algonquin Highlands, nobody knew. So it caught everybody off guard. There was no hints given. And then all of a sudden they said, too bad, we're closing it. You guys have nothing to say or do. We did our own private, volunteer committee consultation. This is in the best interest of Minden Hills and that site. Unfortunately, it's not in the best interest.
All right, I want to get Dr. Drummond in. Unfortunately, you are familiar with ER's closing. You dealt with the ER closure in Perth in 2022. How did that affect your ability to meet the needs of the community?
Yeah, I've been there. And I totally get what Patrick has been saying. A rural hospital is, the lifeblood of that community to a large extent. It's not like a city hospital. It usually seems to be the epicenter of healthcare delivery for the region. And yeah, last year we were closed for 3 weeks in an unprecedented closure because of staffing shortages, particularly of nurses. And I too have heart problems. I had a daughter who had cancer. So both as a physician, but also as an individual and a patient, I know the uncertainty that happens when a hospital closes. I'm not an apologist for this government in particular, and communications strategies in healthcare over the last 2 years have been frankly abysmal. So I understand the piece about lack of public consultation and the uncertainty that plays on the minds of Minden residents and people that come to the community during summer months, as they do with ours. But here's the reality of it, is that at the end of the day, a hospital has to decide whether it can provide a designated service and make sure that if they are planning to maintain a service, whatever that be, whether it be emerge or obstetrics or surgery, that the hospital has the capabilities to support that service. Unfortunately, I think Minden is becoming probably an example of what's to come in our province as we tackle with this nursing shortage brought on largely by the actions of the Ford government or the inactions of the Ford government. But also physician shortages as well. And I know the government likes to think, well, we can just get more foreignly trained physicians and nurses, but that doesn't solve the problem of rural coverage, which is a different breed of cat altogether, as well as, emergency department medicine, which is a team approach and requires more than just somebody with an MD license and a pulse. So I assume that this has been a hard decision for them, that they have not made this lightly. But again, the consultation piece seems to be, and the communication piece seems to be really sadly lacking, and that's really unfortunate.
We reached out to Sylvia Jones, Ontario's health minister, and received this comment from her spokesperson, Hannah Jensen. So it reads, the Haliburton and Minden ED sites are being consolidated to one site in Haliburton to provide more timely access to care. It is not a closure. This decision was made carefully by Haliburton Highlands Health Services Board and leadership as they're responsible for daily operational decisions. The consolidation will ensure patients are receiving emergency care in the location that is best equipped to provide urgent acute care, as the Minden site was used primarily to stabilize patients before being dispatched to larger centers and did not have any inpatient beds. The Minden site will remain open for some services and will continue to serve the community. Patrick, I'm going to get your take on it, but I do want to make sure we get this right, that whether it's a consolidation or a closure, what this would mean is it's a 25-minute journey out into Haliburton to see acute care. But first, with that, your response to the statement.
So my response to the statement is the consolidation, or whatever you want to call it, let's call it what it is. It's a closure. Consolidation, amalgamation, it's a closure. They're removing the blue H off the hospital. Nobody can no longer go there. They talk about the doctor and nurse shortages causing almost 22 episodes of where the emergency room was going to close. And that was all at the Haliburton site, not actually at the Minden site. There was many articles put out last year that if one was to close, that they already had in place with radio, with signage and everything else. This ER, please call ahead, just in case, please go to the other one. But people knew that, we accepted that. So when they talk about consolidation, it's just their way of saying, you know what, we're done with this, we're washing our hands, we're not calling it a closure anymore, we're gonna try to spice it up, make it sound better. Call it what it is, a closure's a closure.
All right. Dr. Drummond, around 160 hospital closures have affected Ontario, and in Minden they were given the short 6 weeks notice. What kind of support do emergency rooms need to avoid this?
Well, most of the closures, and keep in mind, this is pretty unprecedented. We haven't had a closure of an Ontario Emergency Department for close to 15 years, I think, probably. And that was because Ontario led the way in the country in terms of maximal support of rural communities through both a Health Forces Ontario program, which would basically parachute in physicians when community hospitals were facing a shortage over a weekend or a week or whatever. And that was a very successful program, so kudos to them. And also they had put in around the year 2000 a funding arrangement that supported rural physicians to maintain active coverage during the low volume midnight hours, so that a doctor could afford to work overnight and get some rest the next day. And now those two programs were superb. Most of the closures currently are on the basis of nursing shortages, which is not absolute but rather relative, and largely because nurses are fed up with this particular government and their approach to the Bill C-124 or whatever it was that capped their wages. After 3 years of COVID, they expected more than rhetoric. So this is a crisis of the government's making. It is not an international shortage. It's just a relative shortage of nurses going elsewhere. Going forward, I think we need to have a more robust provincial, even national program about what we do with rural service delivery, because it's not just Ontario. It's also a lot of the provinces in the Maritimes are chronically closing. Interior of British Columbia, same thing. Southwestern Manitoba, same thing. It's just new to Ontario. And rather than make this kind of an ad hoc, one-off approach, I think we need to look at, what is the reasonable expectation for a rural Canadian in terms of access, timely access to quality care. Most of us think it's around 30 minutes, which sort of covers dry roads on a good day. And if you are going to close an emergency department, then by God, you had better have a plan in place to make sure that when those rare critical cases do arrive, that there's adequate ambulance service and good communications to allow for rapid access to the next nearest available emergency department And so I hope that that has been considered in this particular decision.
All right, Patrick, you get the last word. I have about a minute left. But you brought a contingent this week to Queen's Park to, again, bring the awareness. This was the second time that you had visited Queen's Park. You know, there's a lot of focus on this. There's even a community member who's brought on a human rights complaint against the closure as well. What is next for your group?
We went into Queen's Park to deliver a petition to stand up and show Sylvia Jones that this is not what is good for Minden. The HHS is not making a decision to save the hospitals. They're making a decision because, in my opinion, it's bad management. So close one to save the other is basically what they're doing, and it may or may not work. I asked that specific question to our local MPP, Laurie Scott, today. We had a little bit of a discussion. And when I said to her, I said, you know, well, what happens, say, in 20 years? What's the plan? Well, let's not talk. That's an if. And I said, okay, what happens in 1 month? Say we close one and the doctors don't start showing up from the HFO, from the agencies, they're canceling their shift. She already said the doctors aren't coming from Minden. Well, thing is, what she said is when the Minden site closes, they will make sure if there's any trouble at the Haliburton site, that they won't let it happen. Well, the part that I don't understand is Sylvia Jones has been saying they're not gonna let it happen, they're not gonna let Haliburton site fail. Well, why are they letting Minden and Haliburton site fail now? If they don't have the power to step in now, how are they going to have the power to step in June or in July? So that means they do have the power. And unfortunately, Sylvia Jones and the MOH need to step up. They need to say, you know what, we can do something about this. And they should do something about it now, not wait until, you know, it's last second, oh my gosh, we're going to close, and then do something about it. Do something about it now. Stick to your words. Be there for the residents of Minden and everybody that visits us. Do something now. Open the hospitals up. Let's work together. Let's make a plan because you know what? There's a ton of nurses out there that want to live in the beautiful country of Haliburton County.
Patrick, we are going to leave it there. Thank you so much for bringing the story forward. And Dr. Drummond, thank you so much for your take on this as well. Really appreciate both of your time. That is the agenda for Thursday, May 11th, 2023, as tens of thousands of people continue to flee the fighting in Sudan. Tomorrow, Nam Kiwanuka finds out where the conflict stands and what Canada is doing for those here and there affected by the crisis. I'm Jay Jaganathan. Thanks for watching TVO, for joining us online at tvo.org, and Nam, we'll see you tomorrow.